Jacob Weller rose with the mountain sun, steam curling from his mug as he stood on the porch of his secluded Colorado cabin. The pine trees stood tall like old friends, and the crisp air still smelled like freedom. It had been 3 peaceful years since his retirement from public life, but some people didn't know how to let peace be. That morning, 2 unfamiliar men marched up his gravel driveway in cheap-looking uniforms. One of them, barrel-chested and loud, barked, "Sir, this property is under HOA regulation. You're trespassing." Jacob didn't flinch. He noticed. Their badges were crooked plastic, likely printed off the internet. The taller one held up a wrinkled paper. "Eviction order," he snapped. Jacob slowly removed his reading glasses. "That's not a legal warrant, and you're not cops." The men exchanged glances, suddenly less sure. But Jacob had seen this before, only now. He wasn't just any man. What the 2 imposters didn't realize was that Jacob Weller had served 2 terms as Colorado's Attorney General. He'd prosecuted real criminals and exposed corruption, and he could smell both from a mile away. Calmly, he walked back inside and picked up a black leather folder from his office drawer, his legal land deed, still stamped and notarized. From the state registry, he stepped back outside, holding it in one hand and his phone in the other. "You have 60 seconds to get off my property," he said, "or I'll call the sheriff, the federal marshals, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation." The men hesitated. "We were told you weren't the legal owner," one mumbled. "Told by who?" Jacob asked. When they didn't answer, he already knew. The Homeowners Association. The same HOA that had recently tried to pressure him into handing over his private land to join the community. He had refused. And now, they'd escalated. With a practiced tone, Jacob tapped a contact labeled Doge Liaison and spoke clearly. "This is Weller. Possible law enforcement impersonation on private property. Send units." Then he turned and calmly set out 2 extra lawn chairs. "Sit," he told the fakes. "You're not going anywhere." The 2 men, sensing the game had changed, slowly obeyed. Jacob knew how to manage criminals, and more importantly, how to do it without lifting a finger. 25 minutes later, a real sheriff's SUV rolled up. Sirens, silent but lights flashing. The deputy stepped out, recognized Jacob instantly, and shook his hand. "Sir, I assume those are the suspects." Jacob nodded. "Attempted intimidation, unlawful entry, impersonation of a peace officer, likely under HOA pressure." The deputy took out cuffs. "Copy that." As the fakes were taken into custody, one stammered, "We didn't know who he was." The deputy just smirked. "Now you do." As they were led into the SUV, Jacob noticed another car pulling up fast. A black Audi with HOA license tags. Out stepped Craig Hemmings, the smug president of the HOA board, looking startled to find flashing lights in Jacob's driveway. "Mr. Weller, he began, but the deputy interrupted. "Sir, step aside. We're conducting an investigation." Hemmings tried to wave it off. "This is all just a misunderstanding. We sent private contractors to verify land boundaries." Jacob raised his voice for the first time all day. "You sent men dressed like deputies, carrying fake warrants to intimidate a private citizen off his own land." The deputy turned to Hemmings. "You coordinated this." "No, I mean yes, but not the uniforms," he stammered. The deputy radioed backup. "We've got another possible charge. Conspiracy to impersonate law enforcement." Hemmings blanched. His power play had collapsed. What he didn't know was that Jacob had built careers off exposing men like him. The remaining neighbors stood across the road, watching in stunned silence. They had always heard rumors about Jacob's past, but now they saw the truth, not just in the law books tucked under his arm, but in the way real officers deferred to him. Craig Hemmings, now handcuffed and red-faced, was being read his rights. Jacob stayed silent, not out of pride, but out of principle. Justice didn't need yelling. It just needed time. As the officers pulled away, the quiet of the mountains returned. Birds chirped. Wind rustled the trees. Jacob walked back to his porch, picked up his untouched mug, and took a sip. Still warm, still strong, just like him. He opened the folder. Again, double-checked the coordinates on his deed, and smiled. He had earned this land. Defended it once in court. And now, once again, he defended it. This time without lifting anything but a phone. Inside the cabin, he sat at his wooden desk, and wrote 2 letters. The first was to the state bar, requesting investigation into HOA legal overreach. The second was to a young law professor he mentored, encouraging him to teach a class on property rights and community abuse. Jacob knew this wouldn't be the last time someone tried to play games with power, but he also knew he wasn't alone. That evening, his phone buzzed, a message from a neighbor. "We saw everything. Thank you for standing up." Another read. "Didn't know you were that Weller." No wonder they panicked. Jacob didn't need recognition. He just needed the truth, and the law, to keep working. And as he stood on his porch again at dusk, the stars shining overhead, he smiled. They tried to scare him out, but they forgot he was the law. By morning, the town was buzzing. The news of HOA impersonation and Jacob Weller's legal counterstrike had spread like wildfire. Local newspapers picked up the incident, headlining it, "Retired Attorney General outs fake cops at cabin." Meanwhile, the HOA board held an emergency closed-door meeting, minus its president, who was still sitting in county lockup awaiting federal review. Jacob watched from his porch, sipping his usual black coffee, calmly sorting through a stack of envelopes that had arrived overnight, mostly letters of support. One from a nearby veteran read, "We need more men like you standing up to this HOA tyranny." But Jacob wasn't interested in praise. He had spent decades defending civil liberties. What concerned him now was accountability. And that's why, after lunch, he placed a call to the county commissioner's office. "I'd like to request a public hearing on the overreach and misconduct of the Ridge Valley HOA," he said simply. The hearing was set for Thursday at the community center. Word spread fast. Residents were tired of the HOA's bullying tactics, from forced fines to illegal surveillance. Jacob arrived precisely at noon, dressed not in a suit but in worn jeans and a flannel. Still, he carried the presence of a judge. When the board tried to defend itself, claiming outsourced verification errors and miscommunication, Jacob quietly stepped forward. "Let me be very clear," he said into the mic. "The HOA sent men impersonating sworn law enforcement officers to intimidate a property owner. They violated state and federal statutes and endangered lives." A hush fell over the crowd. He continued, "I've spent 30 years in the justice system. I've seen cartels act with more accountability than what we witnessed here." One resident stood and clapped, then another, then the entire room. The HOA board's attorney looked visibly pale. The walls were closing in. The next day, Jacob filed a civil rights lawsuit, not just against the HOA, but against each individual board member who had signed off on the impersonation plan. The charge, conspiracy to intimidate under color of authority. His legal filing was airtight, backed with surveillance footage, body cam recordings, and his own notarized documentation. As a result, the Ridge Valley HOA's insurance provider froze the board's access to funds pending investigation. Suddenly, the HOA couldn't afford its private contractors, couldn't issue fines, and couldn't pay its attorney. Jacob had taken them down the legal way, using the system they tried to manipulate. Meanwhile, neighbors who once felt powerless began filing their own complaints. Elderly couples who were fined for flower colors, single moms harassed for fence height, veterans who'd been denied flag displays. Jacob offered free legal guidance to each one. "You don't need to fight dirty," he told them. "You just need to know your rights." 2 months later, the board resigned en masse. A public vote was held. This time, no secret ballots, no backroom deals, only transparency. Jacob declined every offer to run for HOA president. "I didn't fight them to become them," he said. Instead, he helped form a new oversight committee of residents and legal advisors who would review every action before implementation. He drafted a community rights charter, one that protected owners from unlawful inspections and intimidation. It became a model document, adopted by 3 neighboring communities. Jacob's quiet victory had turned into a regional movement. He never stood on stages, he never shouted, but when he walked into town, people held the door open, not out of fear but respect. One local shopkeeper even hung a photo of Jacob in his window with the caption, "The law on the porch." It made Jacob chuckle. That porch had seen quite a lot. Asterisk back at the cabin, the seasons changed. Autumn painted the pines in gold. Jacob had just finished stacking firewood when a letter arrived, this time, from the governor's office. It thanked him for his commitment to justice and invited him to speak at the annual Legal Ethics Symposium in Denver. He politely declined. Instead, he sat by the fire, writing a long letter to his grandchildren, telling them about the time fake cops tried to take his land, and how, without raising his voice, he took back his dignity, his property, and his peace. "Courage," he wrote, "isn't loud, it's steady. It stands when others try to shake it." His story would eventually appear in law journals, not as a courtroom case, but as a lesson in citizen empowerment. But to Jacob, it wasn't about legacy, it was about reminding people, justice doesn't retire, it just moves to quieter places. Asterisk one cold December morning. Jacob walked the trail behind his cabin, now protected under private trust. He paused at a spot overlooking the lake, the same lake the HOA once claimed as communal, now legally restored to his deed. The sun reflected off the water, calm and unwavering. He took a deep breath and smiled. Somewhere down in town, a new family moved into the neighborhood, free from fear of arbitrary fines. A veteran raised a flag without hassle. A grandmother planted sunflowers by her fence again. Change didn't always come with revolutions. Sometimes it came with one man and a cup of coffee, refusing to be pushed. Jacob Weller wasn't a sheriff. He wasn't a judge. He wasn't a politician anymore. But in that quiet cabin, on that quiet land, he was exactly what justice looked like.